Yep. It looks like we're in business. We have the noise reduction on within the video broadcast. Notice you can't hear the fan now. Now you can. I got the light set up overhead. I got the Canon camera, my really good camera over here recording with natural blur in the background. And I have the light set up in the background where it looks like a sunset. Isn't that cool? Looks like I could be outside. It's wicked cool. Really liking it. So, continuing from the previous video, what I want to get into is, let's get out of here and get right into this. So, like I was talking about in the previous video, we'll get into what this is in a minute. What you're looking at here, this is a faded version of the original photograph of this person. Up here is inside of Clip Studio Paint Pro. Is the drawing I did with the challenge basically is that I decided to take on. For whatever reason, the technology just lured me in. The idea of, and how grateful I am to have this piece of technology here, this Wacom Pro 24 is pretty crazy. Been using exclusively the felt tipped nibs on the pen. I'll get into the device right now. That could be for a later video if you want a review on the Wacom. If anyone's interested in that, I might consider doing it. I've been using this Wacom for about a year and a half now, but just this past few weeks is the first time I've attempted to get back into portrait drawing for the first time on this digital tablet. Clip Studio I really like versus Photoshop, and I won't get into that why in this video. If you want to know, if you're interested in the video on that, particularly why I choose Clip Studio, particularly for digital drawing and digital painting, I can make another video on that. If you're interested, let me know. A moth flying around you. But not in this video. Let me go to the point. So after giving up on my portrait drawings traditionally for quite a while, I got back into, for the first time a few years ago, the biggest portrait drawing I ever attempted. It was 16 by 30 inches. And I'll demonstrate that on my YouTube. I have a video of a whole time lapse of me doing a traditional drawing. Now, interestingly enough, digital drawing, the idea of it has kind of brought me back into portrait drawing. The challenge to see if it could be done in Clip Studio using just the basic tools that I use with real drawing. Basically a pencil tool, the blender, and the eraser. That's it. But first, let me get into demonstrating the last traditional, biggest, full-size, full detail. Switch account here one moment. Studios. This is all just prototype stuff. This video here, but let's take a look at it. The content, here we go. Let's take a look at that video real quick. And I won't put the sound on, the music on. You just see the video demonstrated. I don't want the music being a distraction for it. So let's go full screen here. Make sure I'm not hearing the sound. Do not want to hear the sound. I don't want to hear it myself. Let's let that play for a minute and just in a smaller window for a bit so we can demonstrate this alongside with the digital painting, the digital drawing, I mean, painting. So traditional, you see I used and measured by hand and scale up with ruler with drafting techniques using the lightest pencil, going in there and doing the lights first, and then going and doing the mids and then doing the darks. And I'm basically doing exactly the same thing in Clip Studio with pencil tool, the blender tool, which I find the blender tool in Clip Studio very exclusive and the biggest reason why I use Clip Studio over Photoshop is that blending tool. It emulates the real blender that I use for pencil work very, very closely. You can see here, this is all quickly done, but making plot points, just little dots measuring over here on the reference photo. You can see little dots if you look closely I made with pencil and scaling it up and measuring exactly the same point it should be. And that in and of itself is something I could teach as a whole class on a side note, how to plot point those key points. I almost, well, we'll get to that in a minute. In Clip Studio, I made a grid in Illustrator, the square grid system, and I've never actually used the square grid system. I've been presented with it or saw it quite a few times. I'm familiar with it from art class back in high school and going to college. And it works, and I tried it once in college. The first time I ever tried it actually was in college. I never, for whatever reason, maybe I felt like I was cheating or it was too easy or something. I think it's easier in a way, but I think this plot pointing is a lot more accurate. I don't find myself ever readjusting what I'm doing traditional. It's plot dead on. And the digital drawing, I found myself having to recorrect again and again and again and again. Partially because of the square grid system, it's not exact plotting points. And, getting into the technical aspect of the Wacom, now, the digital drawing on a screen is a lot different than drawing on a piece of paper. This technology, the parallax, the distance between the screen and your pixels is very minimal. So the precision is right on. That part is like 98% what I would expect with traditional drawing, having spent my whole life practicing and developing my sensitivity with traditional graphite on paper. And this is the final pencil drawing here. This is all 100% graphite, 16 by 20, 5-layer, thick Bristol board. Now, of course, I edited it a little bit in Photoshop to make it look like how my eyes saw it. I have the actual real drawing up on the wall. I'll show you the actual drawing next time. But yeah, this isn't my video. Let's get out of here now and get into the digital. And I can demonstrate the time lapse of the digital that I've done so far. Now, what I did here is I'm trying out different things with what the digital advantages are over traditional. Now, the first thing is you can zoom way in. That's really, really cool. Normally, I need magnifying glasses and very bright lights to see the fine detail. Very, 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 very fine razor point, needle point level of sharpening on my graphite lead pencils to get in between and weave in that between the paper texture and then weaving it in and ingraining it into the fibers of the paper texture. It's quite a process to get the toning smooth. Now, to do large areas of toning, especially darker toning, all smooth like a gradient with traditional, it's very, very, very time consuming. It's layering and blending, a little darker layering, blending again and again and again, and going back and forth, looking at the details to blend in and looking back to see where the gaps are in the tone, those even tones. Now, in digital, that's very, very easy. because I don't have to weave in between the tech paper of the texture. And you can see here, I did add a simulation of the paper texture for looks, but that doesn't help me with the feel. Now, the Wacom does have etch glass, and with a felt tip, there is some resistance. So it's not too bad, but it's nothing like what I'm used to with a pencil on this paper that I normally work with traditional. I have about 1/10 of the amount of feedback because there's hardly any friction. And it's not three-dimensional. With traditional, you're weaving into the fibers of the paper. Now, with the screen, it's not happening. It's just very, very smooth. You can see if I take the paper texture away, it's just smooth. It just pixelates when we go away in. There's no grain like there would be with pencil. And I can zoom in with some high resolution imagery or photographs of the digital drawing next time to show you. And I actually think I'll do that right now. Pause this. Show you what it looks like close up. Now, this is only half toned, half done. I figured I'm just playing around, experimenting with the shade scales, and you'll see the grid system I'm going to download in a minute. The grid I created in Illustrator, and thinking about possibly creating a course where people can, or these assists and these downloadable files and contents, where people can learn how to draw photorealistically. Now, this would be an advanced level doing portrait work. This is a side note for later stuff, but yeah, just kind of stripping away all of or a lot of the detail in the photograph over here, taking away all the dark, and I can demonstrate what the full dark looks like. Somewhere right here. This is the black and white. I photoshopped all of this. I created all this white space effect in Photoshop and Lightroom from my original photograph. So, on a side note, all these portraits that you're going to see, all of the drawings from all of the reference photography is all from my own photography. My stuff from the past was always copying, and we'll get into what copying does, what my ability to copy a photograph. We'll get into how it builds core awareness and control. That's too deep for this video. I'm going to cut this out. Just a side note for myself. Keep it to surface content. So let's go into, is the original photograph, black and white version, photoshopped. And this is the one sort of half-toned. Let's see if we can go into the original photograph of that drawing you saw me do on YouTube just a minute ago. High resolution shot of the grain of the paper. So bear with me 1 minute. I'm going to find that. I'll show you this stuff. I'm in Lightroom in my photo archive, which is comprised of all of my photography since I've gotten into full frame digital SLR since 2007. All the way up to 2023, altogether in this archive are 83,000 of my photos. And I'll go by the whole file here all the way back. This is some of my older work. You see it like this, for example. Perfect. Now, this is my older work. This is a piece of paper. I think it was like 14 inches wide. And it's not a very good high resolution shot. I took this photograph in probably the year 1993 or 4, maybe 95, a couple of years after I drew this picture. This is all 100% graphite, and I put a little bit of colored pencil in it with the green grass and the red just to mess around. The amount of work to get those tires that black and everything that black with mechanical pencil is just, and then blending with a dry brush, is just, I can't even fathom. This was stuff that was just like my my Zen work. I never thought about um, where what as it was to a means to an ends. In other words, is it going to be sold or somebody's going to think of this picture? It was all for me, just me and me. Just to it's a exercise of self mastery. I'm realizing, looking back, I never realized it's why I was driven to draw was to develop my awareness and my control, and to be able to see objectively. And we'll get into that. Um, this is not a very high resolution. I think it was 2 megapixels way back when I had one of the first digital cameras that came out. So unfortunately, and I got ruined over the years. I lost all of the detail here, but you get the idea. This is another one I did. This one took, I'd say, a couple 100 hours. You're talking about zooming in with magnifying glasses for this stuff, for this lettering. So what else? Let's find. There's a house I did. Face I did way back. This is just from a calendar. All other people's pictures. It wasn't my own photography. This one somebody commissioned me to do a house. Cat. Military guy. This is way back in high school. And there's the snowmobile one. That's all pencil, 100% graphic. You can even see the wrinkle on the page right here. Again, I lost the detail. This was back around the same time as that race car image. Lost all the detail. It's just the amount of work that I put into this with a pencil, probably 300 hours over the period of like a year. Just a little bit at a time. Never rushing. It was always, it's like that kind of work today. And why I think I'm being pulled back to traditional is because it takes another level of mastery to do the traditional versus digital. Digital, I think, is definitely easier. I think there's a lot more corrections I need to do with recorrecting due to just not being able to blend and lay down smooth gradients with a pencil like I want to. So the blender isn't perfect. The blender in Clip Studio tends to dilute. We'll get into that technical stuff a little later. Stay on track here. Let's see if I can find, though, Sarah's picture of that drawing, a high resolution picture of it. So we'll go back to the library and search for that. We'll put just drawing. Now, this one, find it. Drawing, old drawings. So Wolf I did. Getting into a little bit of airbrushing, experimenting with airbrushing. Didn't do photorealistic stuff for a while. I was doing this weird stuff, like is all the history of my life here, past 15 years or so. I gotta find out. These are all drawing. Let's put Sarah drawing. This is getting too vague. Sarah. Is getting into a lot of this sort of Native American type Vision Quest stuff, real heavy for a while. And some, oh, here it is. Okay, here's the beginning, the reference image here. Here it is. That was taken with the year 2017 with a, well, here's the resolution. The resolution of that other image was probably like 600. So let's see if we can jump to the final. You get the idea here. And let me adjust this so it will look about like it would tie. No whites up with that. Now, very sharpness. Now we zoom in here. Watch this. Now, what you're seeing here is the actual texture of the paper. This is not simulated texture. This is the grain of the paper. So the graphite actually embeds itself in. It's almost like tattooing on skin. You get a layer. It's layering in those layers of light and blending it in. So it embeds into the paper. Then you put another layer of dark on top. And there's a very delicate process to get those blacks to look right, or they'll sheen and gloss over with a very fine point mechanical pencil and blending tools that I've definitely perfected over the years with traditional drawing. So there's a quick demonstration of that. Back to the digital. Now, I think as far as the digital goes, it's a good learning tool, but I don't think it's something that you can see here, even the detail. I can't get it as detailed. It looks sketchy. There's like missing gaps. There's a gap between me and that paper. It's not a direct connection. There's a delay of time with the pixels and the computer reading the tip of the pen, even if it's only milliseconds, and there's a tiny gap of the parallax that's minimal, but then there's a lack of texture and that feel and the three-dimensional sort of dimension to the paper. That it's a much more visceral three-dimensional experience, traditional drawing. So which one is better? And as far as mastery goes and really getting into it, I think traditional all day long. As far as maybe just starting out for the convenience, and I think especially if I can offer some aids like the drawing grid. I'll show you the drawing grid. Wrong grid. So you can see there's a drawing grid I made. Did this in Illustrator. So here's the middle point. Over here, I'll turn my grid on, the same exact grid in the same position. Here in Clip Studio, let's zoom out here so you can see it. So you can see that you can chart where to put. Versus with traditional, I would measure down and left to the point of the eye exactly and make it over here. So I don't like doing the grid as much. In a way, it's easier. In a way, it's harder. So I don't think I'm going to go with digital, but I'm realizing as I do the digital, I think I can provide this kind of aid as sort of practice worksheet that these can be assists to help you see the tones and help you see the values and help you practice rendering, whether it's digital and printable sheets where you could render on physical paper yourself. I think learning maybe first with a digital lesson, and then you take that digital file that you're working with and literally print it out on a piece of paper, and then you can just draw right on that piece of paper. Be ideal. So A would be the digital, and the B or number 2 part of the lesson would be taking that same file and doing it traditionally, or doing it with graphite with real pencil, because there's no substituting the feel and the experience. And the biggest thing is when you're done with a traditional drawing, you have a physical piece that is a one-of-a-kind piece, and it's prone to being damaged, which makes it more valuable. It can be water damaged, sun damaged. It could be burned. It could be stained. It could be bent. So it's like a piece of currency. It's like a piece of like money. Right? It has that inherent value in its substance, whereas a piece of digital art really doesn't have that inherent value in its substance. It's just a representation that's done by the computer. A very, very, very good one, but it's not an original. Now, on a side note, there's something called NFTs, non-fungible tokens. I don't know a lot about it, but apparently it's new technology that allows a digital piece to be a one-of-a-kind, which is really interesting. So I might get into that a little later. That's something interesting to get into, maybe, or to think about for a little later. I'm not even going to demonstrate any of the next layer right now. The next part of this, which is interesting with the digital, is this whole layer is up to the midtones, and I'm going to put a new layer on top. That's going to be the darks. I can demonstrate real quick, and then we're going to finish this up. Pencil tool in Clip Studio. Go pencil. Hold on. Paper texture down a little bit. Why is it making that weird? Let's go to just a design pencil, see what that does. Man, you turn up the resolution. It's a little pixelated right now, but you can see it's not the same as doing it with traditional pencil. There's a little tiny time delay, and most people, although if you're starting learning on your path to learning drawing, I think digital is really the way to go because you could just Control Z and you can dive in without worrying about making those mistakes. Whereas traditional, if you make a wrong move, you're going to permanently mark the paper. It's always easier to darken than it is to remove graphite from the paper because if you do just a little too hard into that paper texture, the paper texture gets destroyed and it loses that grain soft feel. It looks shiny, that looks marred. So there's a very, 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 very delicate process to getting the very dark black without crushing the texture of the paper with traditional drawing that you don't have to worry about at all with I'll demonstrate the blending tool real quick. Whoop, too big. I mean, not the same as real drawing. It's it's good, but I think if you're just starting out, you probably wouldn't know the difference. But for somebody like me who has spent my lifetime, I've probably literally made billions of pencil strokes over my years. Um, it's just it doesn't even come close. If you're going to say, is it apples to apples? No, it isn't. But is it a very powerful, capable tool that is a very legitimate alternate medium to traditional? Absolutely. And there's things you can do digitally that you can't do traditionally. Layering, and we can get into even turning this color later, um, and adding all kinds of special effects, getting into photographic effects, surreal type of stuff with all these layers you could put on. And that can make it something that goes beyond traditional drawing. So this is where it's at. My final conclusion. It's not traditional or digital. Which one am I going to pick? Which one is better? They each have a specific place in my work process. And the insight that I've gained from it is that it's both, right? A, traditional, B, digital, not one or the other, but both. So I think the ideal thing to do would be to do, for example, this portrait here digitally. And then I'll do the same portrait traditionally and save both files. And what it could do is you could take a photograph of the original. Let me see if I can find that. I'll show that to you next time in Lightroom, the original full traditional finished drawing of that one you saw in the YouTube video. And bring it in to Clip Studio. And I'll demonstrate it actually. I'm going to do it right now. Watch this. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. I found it. This is back in the place where we used to live. Show you. Now, let me see if I can get it to look like, because this is how the camera took it. Let me try to enhance this a little bit. As you can see, I got quite deeply into photography over the years, which is something that we'll get more into in other videos, how it relates to all of this. But one moment, let's see if we can get this to look right here. When the white's up, that makes it look about right. Right up there, I can look at it, see if it looks the same. Maybe the contrast down a little bit. Suspect. Now let's crop that. You get a little shadow thing going on over here. Just ignore that. It's kind of a cool little effect, actually. I'll get into how I develop this sort of white space effect as well, if you guys are interested in some photography stuff. Let's just crop that for now. And a little dark in the exposure. Maybe you can see the history. Let's see. Close. Right there. Now let's just open this in Photoshop, and then we'll save it out and bring it back into Clip Studio just to get a feel with a look at a digital partially done and then this full real graphite, all 100% pencil. You can zoom in here, you can see that like doing all of this gradation work, it took me like, the hair took me the most time. Just this one area here took me like probably 3 hours, like, or an hour just to do that one spot. But there's a nice grain to it, right? The mouth was the most challenging. Making those reference points was critical. This took me a long time to learn how to do this, but it was all about the accurate reference pointing. Once you learn the accurate reference point and you can see where things go, then you can see the tones. So I can probably teach you guys some of that stuff if you're interested, because this is the thing, is everybody always makes the comment how talented I am when they see my work. And I honestly cringe every time I hear that, because it's almost like, I know people don't mean it that way at all, they're not aware of it, but in a way, it's almost like a slap on the face, because it doesn't come easy to me. Like, I just whip this stuff out. I mean, show you my older work. I didn't start this way. It never came natural to me. It was always, I think, the talent, I think, is just the drive to want to discipline and practice. And I think not everyone maybe can get to that photorealistic level, but most people who really want to, who have any drawing aptitude at all, or at least an intermediate drawing aptitude, will be very surprised. I've just been all these ideas and insights coming to me, introspecting on my creative process. And not only that, but my thinking process, how I look and zoom in and out and shift from subjective to objective. For example, when you zoom in here, right, this is a face, right? Obviously, anyone's going to look at this and they're going to say, what is it? Oh, it's a face. It's a woman. There's an eye. There's two, has a mouth, right? But in reality, that's not what you're looking at here. What you're looking at on this screen is just the differences between light and dark pixels. Zoom in and we start to see that. And it's basically only about 10 levels of shade, or 10 squares. So I can get into some of that interesting stuff. I could zoom out here. That's all that is. It's an illusion. Now, you zoom in until you lose subjectivity. At what point do you stop? Oh, that's an eye. Let's try it. Here, right? Especially if you kind of spin it around and play with moving shit around like this. Little detail, like, give it away. A little closer till we lose subjectivity. What is this? What are we looking at? What is that? Is it a mountain? So I've realized that I've kind of learned how to momentarily look to such a level of detail that I lose that mental labeling, and I just see lights and darks and where they're placed and what level of shade they're at. And then I'm able to, through with conditioning of my hand with a pencil, to render those shades and smooth them to a resolution that allows it to become photorealistic. So even if you're not interested, I think a lot of people in doing photorealism are copying photography or copying a photo. Um, it really builds your ability to see and expand your awareness, and it develops your level of feel and control. Um, it literally builds neurons between your brain and your body. Every time you're doing those movements, you're firing those neurons. So it remains a permanent connection. Like I said, I've literally made no shit. You're not. If I could count in one drawing, there's probably a million pencil strokes, 10 or 15 strokes a second over 70 hours, over my whole lifetime. Billions of repetitions. It's a literal physical exercise that's conditioning your nervous system and your sensitivity that applies to other things. For example, driving. And we'll get into some of those interesting correlations that I've made as some insights in some next videos coming up, and some possible. I'll save it as a surprise for that way. But anyway, let's see if we can then just save this out as it is. You won't play with it too much more. Save as a copy, and we'll bring it into Clip Studio and just compare it side by side with half done digital. We'll put it over here in my portfolio drawings. There are portrait with JPEG. We'll just put final. Final graphite. I think it was 16 by 20 inches. So I'll just leave a note for what it is and what size is. Photoshop there. Back to Clip Studio. I'll import that in right on top of. Well, let's open a new one side by side. Let's remove the black layer from it. Let's go File, New. The same exact dimensions are already saved here that we made this one in, which is 16 by 8, 600 resolution. Not right. It's 16 by 10, 300 dpi. Might have to bump it up to 600 dpi though to get that same level of detail as I can get with a pencil. So that's the resolution I'm drawing at, is at least 600 dpi on a side note, up to 1200 possibly. So anyway, let's same size, and next we'll compare side by side to this half finish. We'll take the grid away, take these graph things away. Now this was all done freehand with a digital pen, with just the pencil tool, the blending tool. Try not to use the spray tool at all, just the pencil and the blender tool. And the eraser with that pencil in that size and mode in eraser mode, which works perfectly. So I'm all about breaking things down to the most simple things. There's all kinds of stuff here that you could do in Clip Studio. It's always been my philosophy, and what I want to share with you guys and what I want to teach is the pathway to mastery. It's simple. Less is more. It's kind of funny, but it's literally like Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. And so those repetitions that seem mundane, and that's what learning to render from a photograph does. It's like wax on, wax off, right? We'll get into that in some next videos. But let's file, and we'll import the final drawing here. It's a little too dark. When you drag it into Clip Studio, it, for whatever reason, changes it. Clip Studio is definitely not the best thing for representing photos. Good more for reference, but let's try to add an adjustment layer to it and bring it back a little bit. I think just bring down the transparency a little bit, maybe. No, it doesn't work. I'm going to have to add a quick adjustment a little bit. We just, levels correction. Let's try that. Right. Tones. The lights, highlights maybe look good. Hold on. It's about right. That's what it looks like. It's about what it looks like to my eye, the real drawing. Square it off to the same dimensions now. We'll compare. Drag this one out. A real drawing, Sarah 1. This is the same person. This is the digital drawing, half done or half toned. I might be able to simulate that. Side note, by turning this down. Nah, it doesn't work so well. Yeah, let's try to simulate it. Turn it down a little bit like that. It's very similar. And we'll zoom way in and we'll see what these look like. Just paper texture is a simulated. So let's bring these windows a little bigger, side by side. Things out of there. As you can, side by side. Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. So this is the same person. This is unfinished. So it's not a totally valid comparison yet because this is unfinished, but we'll zoom in here, continue to zoom in. Let's bring back some of this transparency, a little more detail. You can start to see like a mouth. It actually looks pretty close. The texture layer materials in Clip Studio really does a good job, I think, of simulating that paper texture. So, not bad, not bad. Pretty impressive, actually. Of course, you can't feel the texture with the digital. That's the thing. It's something about feeling and holding that. And I'll demonstrate that. Take it off the wall and I'll hold it up and demonstrate it. Actually, I'll do it right now. I want to take it off the wall. I had it taped. Tape on the back of the wall. See how big this thing is? It's big. And it's thick. It's like thick board. Actually, I dented it in a couple spots. You can see I dropped stuff on it and dents it. So it's really interesting stuff to work with. I want to do another one of these. I definitely want to get back into traditional drawing. There's just something just so hands-on about it that it's a craft. It's like an old school master skill type of thing, and I think I want to help people get back into that. Um, it's incentivized to take your time to not just have something be a means to an end, and I'll show this to you in a minute, but to use it as like the monks always had an art form. The arts are the hidden disciplines to self mastery or self actualization. And that's all for side note, deeper content stuff later, just notes to myself. But here is the original, just to prove that and demonstrate. Here it is. Um, Zoom out here. See it? As you couldn't see it. Make sure we're zoomed out here. Hold on a second. Let's zoom in a little more. Too far back. All right, here we go. So here is the original. So we'll conclude this video for now. Over and out for the moment.